Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce podcast. Dayu and myself have been talking about how you should leverage China fulfillment, and we can talk about this for hours. But actually, the much better way is having a D2C brand on our podcast, sharing their journey with us. So basically, Svea and Thomas are joining to see how they really created from scratch their D2C brand and also scaled it into a global 9-figure brand. And this story is truly about their journey. Although their results have been amazing, their journey is even more amazing. Tune in for this episode and hope you enjoy this one. Svea and Thomas, thank you for joining me and Dayu on this podcast. Very excited. Talking about your journey itself, what was the starting point like for you, both of you?
Yeah, so thank you for having us. First of all, we're also excited. This is our very first podcast, so we've never done this before. Yeah, maybe Thomas, you want to tell about the start?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Dayu, for inviting us to the podcast. So basically, the start of our journey, we come from a dropshipping background. That's how we started with ecom. But we quickly saw that doing dropshipping is always like you go up and then it comes down and you have to find a new product and just keep repeating the process. And that's just not sustainable long term. And we were so sick and tired of doing that after like 10, 15, 20 stores that we decided to maybe it's time to start a brand. And that's when we actually found a product that we took and customized. And we started selling it the same way as dropshipping, so sending directly from the Chinese fulfillment center. That went very, very good in the beginning. In the beginning, we were scaling super fast in the first few months. I think we did somewhere around 2 million in revenue in just a few months. And then we were like, okay, this is becoming something. Let's build it into a long-term brand instead of treating it as a dropshipping product. And that's when we were like, okay, we have some money. Let's buy inventory and ship it over to the US with sea freight, because we thought back then that that was the brand way of doing things. We thought that we had to do this to become a real brand and something that we could build into a brand that will last for 5 to 10 plus years. But I think that was the start of something very painful as well for us. The cash flow issues at first, because with shipping stuff over with sea freight to the US, you have to do a certain bulk amount, often like one container or even more. And then you have to ship it over to the US with sea freight, which takes around 2 to 3 months to arrive in the US. And you also have to pay for the goods to be sent over, which is also very costly. And then there's the import fees. In the US, you have the Trump tax. Trump tax is something that's been added recently, I think a few years ago. That basically adds another, in our case, 40% additional custom fees. And all that stuff adds up. But that's just the starting point. And then you have to get it from the port to the fulfillment center. So we decided to pick one of the bigger fulfillment centers. I think back then we were using Deliver, so one of Shopify's fulfillment centers. It was done very professionally. It's a not a bad company or anything, but the fees were super expensive. So there's storage fees, picking fees, handling fees, all kinds of different fees that apply. And if you can't get rid of your inventory, they will add even more fees on top. And all those hidden fees that we didn't account for, they actually took away our margin from the product that we were selling. And with the ad costs, plus the cash flow issues, plus that you can't replenish the inventory fast enough. That meant that we couldn't scale the brand and we were basically stuck. And all the inventory was in the USA. Back then, I think we had 20,000 units in the US, which was all of our money back then. And we just couldn't get it out quickly enough. Then we had to think about, okay, let's order new inventory for in 2 months or in 3 months. And you had to calculate upfront all the costs associated with buying new inventory for the next upcoming season or quarter. And that just wasn't easy for us. And we had to get a loan from a bank. And then we actually couldn't get the inventory sold because of issues with the offer, with the creatives. And we were really, really struggling. And then we actually, when we had that problem with not being able to sell our inventory, we decided we had to do something about it. And maybe we had to go back to drop shipping. And that's when we got in touch with Ecommerce. And we were actually looking into bringing back the fulfillment to China near our factory, because we could replenish the goods in less than 30 days. We didn't have to pay for all the storage fees, all the import fees, the sea freight. And that's what we actually did. We went back, and back then I know it felt like a step back from building a brand. We were like, this feels painful. This is like a fail for us. We thought we messed up, and now we're here back drop shipping. And that really was a strange feeling to do that. But quickly we realized that there was not that much difference, because our main concern was the shipping speed. And what we noticed with the US fulfillment center, if you pick the standard shipping rate, the standard shipping fee, then the goods arrive in like 5 to 7 business days. While if you ship from China, it's just a few business days on top of that. And actually, customers, they don't mind waiting a bit longer if you tell them up front and are transparent about it. And I think that is where we realized that we could skip all the hassle and just ship from China again. And I think that completely transformed the business for us.
Thank you, Thomas. I actually wanted to chime in a little bit with my own background that has some similarities to your own, except a little bit backwards, because I originally started with my own brand like 8 years ago or so. Pillar Learning. It was a fully customized robotics product, AI enabled toy for kids. And it was all US fulfillment. Back then, even though it was produced in China, I actually had no idea that you can ship directly from China. And we had a lot of investment. We were on Shark Tank. And immediately after our Shark Tank episode premiered, we had 800 orders, like right away. And we're like, oh shit, we're going to run out of inventory in the US. And we had a whole crunch. We had to pay $20 more per unit for air freight just to get it in time, because it aired right before Christmas. So it was crazy. And then around that time was when I found out about drop shipping. And I was like, oh, and that was back when it was actually drop shipping, like AliExpress type of drop shipping. And I was like, wow, this is so much easier than what I was doing over here. So I kind of dabbled on the side, some of my own drop shipping stores. Back in those days, it was early in drop shipping, so you can kind of sell anything and make money. Now, I didn't really like what the products I was selling. It was just AliExpress products. It was not customized. I was not proud of the quality at all. And actually, it was the same products that you guys are selling, but I won't give it away, but much, much worse quality. But then what I realized was you don't have to drop ship in order to get all the flexibility of shipping from China. Now, so I'm not as creative as you two. So I'm not as excited about the front end branding side of it. So I took the other approach where, okay, I actually believe in this approach of the added flexibility, the agility from shipping from China. And that's exactly why we started Ecommerce. And at first, helping more drop shippers who wanted to access China fulfillment, but also build a real brand and being able to disconnect that. And now, obviously, you have Shein, you have Temu, you have more and more brands like yourself, high-end, good premium brands who want to access China fulfillment, shipping around the world as a method to get your products to the customers and nothing to do with the product quality itself. That's up to you. That's up to the brand owners, right? You guys have a great product. I mean, I use your product all the time, by the way. So I really believe in your product. And I think it really shows how important it is not to see your supply chain as somehow one black box, right? Either drop shipping or this concept of so-called what a real brand should do, which maybe a couple years ago used to be local fulfillment, right? But I think now the entire market has realized, especially something like Temu, right? Okay, wow, people are actually buying from Temu. You two are from Belgium. Actually, I do know that even 4 years ago in the Netherlands and Belgium, there was this thought that the average consumer would not want to actually buy something that's shipped directly from China, right? And now Temu in the Netherlands, I believe it's number 4 in terms of the top e-commerce channels, right? So obviously the consumers, even in your countries and your markets, have spoken. But to your point, it's about being honest, right? It's about being honest that it is going to take 5 to 8 days, 5 to 9 days, and not 4 to 5 days. And to add to one point though as well is it's also actually about having a great brand and a great product that someone is willing to wait a couple days more for. Don't sell toilet paper. Don't sell anything generic, because why wouldn't they just want to get it from Bo.com, from Amazon for 2 days, right? So part of it is, and credit to you two as well, is actually building a brand that is unique enough and attractive enough so that people are actually willing to wait, and that you're honest to your customers about to manage the expectations and exceed them as well between your product quality and also your shipping times as well.
Yeah, that's actually super important for us, having everyone updated. So when they're waiting for their order, we also provide tracking and emails throughout the whole journey when they're waiting for their order. I think that's super important to just not just let them wait and then they have to contact us, because that's actually bad. We don't want them keep waiting and not knowing anything about the order. Keeping them updated is something that we have always done, even from China.
Yeah, and also what Dayu said is that customization is super important when it comes to shipping from China, because why would someone wait on something they can just buy from Bol.com or Amazon or whatever marketplace you have in your country? But if people know they can't get it elsewhere and the quality is worth the wait, then of course they are going to do it. And it's just the brand that has to show how they are different. And I think a big part of that is talking to your suppliers and making sure that every small part of your product is customized. For example, if you take a wallet, I would take every piece of that wallet and look how I can make it better. The screws, maybe the fabric, maybe the insides, maybe add some RFID protection, or maybe do something completely different, like changing the color. And I think when you do something like that, then you are so far ahead of things like Temu or AliExpress, because they are on the way down. They want to cut costs as much as possible. And I think a brand has to do the opposite. They have to increase the cost for you as well, but you can charge way more. And I think the gap between charging $10 and $80, that's obvious for the customer that it's going to be good quality. And especially today, I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, actually, the product that I was selling before, the original low quality version of your product, I think your retail price is about maybe 4 times what I was selling it for. And especially back in the day, I would not have even imagined that this product could sell even twice as much as my retail price. But it really shows how important quality is. So how I think about a great brand is not just about the surface level. It's not just about the website. It's not even just about the product quality. It's about everything. It's about your customer's relationship with your brand. So also related to what Svea was saying about keeping customers updated, right? Having the right kinds of shipping methods, having the right types of even customer service communications that is aligned with your brand so that your customers, they want to buy from you. I mean, I personally think that the best way to sell is not to actually sell. The best way to sell is make your customers want to buy from you at the price that you set that they believe is worthwhile enough. And without sharing any more secrets than this, but I believe we talked about, one of your customers bought $3,000 worth or so of products, right? And that is incredibly impressive for your product. That really shows how valuable it is and how important it is to invest in your brand, product quality, logistics, all the other branding elements, obviously, right? But including like every single touch point, including customer service, including, some of the things that personally, I believe some brands should probably focus a little bit more on and not put along as something that they have to do, right? Something that they need to control or manage costs around.
Yeah, I also think it's a process. Like the product we initially sold has nothing to do with the product that we're selling right now. So we've always made constant improvements based on feedback from the customer to get to the product where we are at right now. So it's not always about launching the perfect product. You have to start with something. It has, of course, to be different and unique, but you can start with like minimal products, something with your vision, but not yet perfect. And that's also something I think is important for someone who is starting ecom.
You are on your 5th version right now, correct? And how long has it been since I guess when you started working on that first custom version?
Well, it has been 3 years, so yeah, 5 versions.
3 years. So that's incredibly impressive because you think about iPhones, right? iPhones come out every year and barely any improvements every year. They just make it more expensive and they add something, right? And a lot of traditional products, I mean, it's impossible, literally, to have like more than one product iteration every year, right? That's crazy. And you guys have been making significant improvements as well. And it's that really shows, I think, the right balance, right? I know you two very well. You two want to build a great product and a great brand, but you're also practical as well. You know that it's not necessary to go for that 100% perfection, which doesn't really exist because part of it is also not just what you think, but what your customers actually respond to, right? You might think that certain things are ideal and your customers don't care. And, or they care about certain things that you didn't actually realize. And that's also why having even the mindset of doing something that is great, but taking it one step at a time, getting the right reactions and iterating fast and be very disciplined about that iteration as well, listening to customers, getting that feedback, and really that hunger to all driving it. How does it make your product, your brand better? It's not just about making money. Making money is an outcome, right? Revenue is an outcome. Profit is an outcome. But at the core of it, and I think this is what makes you two very special, is you want to build something great. You want to build something that your customers love, that they continue to love, and they continue to buy more from your brand. And you're obviously also investing in more product extensions in your brand. And that's exactly what leads to your customers wanting to potentially buy anything that you launch, at least to try it out. Right. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it's not about money in itself. It is about that strong connection with your brand.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think me and my sister were also very perfectionist when it comes to our products. We're also never happy with how it is. We always want to improve. We always want to change it. We always want to create something new, something different. And that's also why we're always looking into what customers are saying. Because myself, if I look at the comments and there's something negative, it's like it feels personal, and it's something I want to solve immediately. And I think we have found like a way to, I think every quarter or every 3-4 months, we take all the feedback, we go back to the supplier and we tell them, look, people are complaining about this, that, and whatever is going wrong. how can we fix this? And sometimes it's very simple, simple changes, but sometimes it's more complex, and then you have to be patient, wait for the samples, you have to test it out, back and forth. So there's a lot of patience as well, but nothing is perfect and nothing will ever be perfect. You have to just start and figure it out along the way. And the best way to do it is listen to your customers. And not only the Facebook comments, because those are usually people commenting that didn't buy. So watch out with those. It's usually people that have bought, and then you have to send them surveys. You have to send them what do you want to see changed about the product. You can ask open questions. That's actually how simple it is once you have a customer base. And no, don't listen to your own ego about, oh, I like this, or that's beautiful, or I like this color, or whatever your product looks like. You have to listen what the customer tells you, and even if you don't like it, you still have to do it, and that's what's going to make it sell, and not the other way around. And I think a lot of founders, they are so in love with their own products and their own idea of the product that they forget the customer side. And I think that's also super important to mention.
Yeah, I think in our case, it's the customer who decides the trajectory of our brand, actually.
That's amazing. I mean, it already shows it's been a journey. And you said already 3 years ago was version 1. And also the whole journey from US to China, and actually building the brand with iterations on the product and how consumers perceive you, building a community around it, because that's also something that you're actively doing, leveraging influencers and actually creating something that stands out from what you might be able to buy somewhere else on a local platform. I heard you say, Thomas, my sister and I, so you guys are operating as a team, obviously. And I've always been fascinating, because if we look at our client base, the ones that are actually excelling are team structured. They either have a group of people they work closely with and share information with, or they actually team up. And you see a lot of those corporations also fail. They get into an argument because it starts all with great dreams and it falls apart. But how do you, both of you, Svea, have been able to sustain this journey with ups and downs, and how do you divide the task between who does what?
Yeah, I actually think it started when we were very small, when we were little. Our bond has always been strong, and I think we never actually argued about something. And we always had the same vision, even when we were in high school. Oh yeah, we have to do something. We have to start a business. We have to. It could be whatever. It was not e-commerce at that time, but we just had like a vision for our future, and we both of us had that. So it was not just Thomas or just me. We both had that vision, and somehow it was also something we always would do together as a team. So already from in high school that started. After I graduated from university, we then decided to do it for real, and Thomas was already doing it partly. And I think it's been one of the best things ever. And we never argued, I think, just because we have the same vision. We have one goal, and there's nothing that will take us from that path.
Yeah, and I also think that the reason we don't argue is because we have seen a lot of people argue in our family and other on other aspects in our life, and it usually never has a good outcome. There's always someone who's angry and doesn't want to speak to that person for like 20 years. That has happened in our family, and I think we hate arguing so much that we just find a way to figure it out, and we're just super open, and we just have the goal, like Svea said, and I think that's actually how we manage to keep our head cool even during bad times when Facebook ads are not working or the ROAS drops. It's easy to start arguing with each other, but that's not going to solve anything. You have to figure out together the solution, and that's going to bring you to your ultimate goal of building a business. And I think a lot of people, they let emotions take control, and we're actually very good in blocking emotions. And that's, I think, parts of how we grew up, basically.
Thomas, I think something you said earlier when we were talking about customers was about ego. And I think it applies here as well, is you can't let your ego get a hold of you, whether it is your ego around what you think the customer wants or your ego around what you think yourself can do or should be done. And you have to really look at what the vision, the goal is actually, whether it is customer satisfaction or building a great business. And that sometimes means finding partners. I mean, there are a lot of probably great econ minds out there who are maybe just one-man shows or one-woman shows with maybe a team of VAs. And that's fine. Like, they make money, right? However, again, like Simon said, is the biggest businesses that we work with, they are teams. They work with partners. And the greatest founders are confident in themselves, but also aware of where their strengths and weaknesses are and find the right partners, whether it is within family or, I know that you two scale a lot working with great agencies as well. And that's fine. That's totally fine. You don't need to have a massive internal team to scale a great business. And part of it is not having that ego or emotions and having to have control over everything, right? And especially every little thing, and being able to value things like your customers, your business goals, and it sounds like your personal relationships as well, and not letting your egos get a hold of that. So, I think that's a very important point as well.
Yeah, it's funny because usually when we take big business decisions, it's usually us following our gut feeling. 99% of the partners we work with, it's purely based off how do we feel when we talk to them and interact with them. So the first touch point is always super important, especially with agencies. When you feel someone is like too salesy or too trying to pull you in, then it's usually too good to be true. When someone is like super open and it's someone that's humble and really wants to help and help the brand succeed, then you can just feel it. When it doesn't feel right, you just don't have to go for it, and that has been also a big part of our success.
And in most cases, our gut feeling is the same.
Yeah.
That helps.
So that's also good.
We're talking about ego. With ego, it means a lot overcoming things that are uncomfortable, but also being able to accept that some people might have information for you that you don't have, and you have to make adjustments to your business. But we've seen there's been a lot of adjustments being made. What will be for you the main turning points for you to scale to this almost 9-figure level right now?
Yeah, so one of the main turning points was, like what we said in the past, is switching to China fulfillment. That one has been major for us, and that was also a difficult decision for us to choose. Yeah, like we said, we were a bit afraid of going back to the dropshipping model. But yeah, when you have good partners and someone who can show you the pros and the cons, then I think it's rather easy to just make the decision based on those pros and cons. Yeah, we also went to the factory in China actually in November of last year, and we are not that keen on flying. Actually, we're a bit afraid of flying. So for us to take a flight to Hong Kong and then go to China cross border, it was quite a trip for us. But that's also something we felt like we had to do. It's the connection with the supplier, certainly because we had already been working with them for 2.5 years, and we never actually saw them in real life, only by email, not even by calling or having a meeting like this. It was just by email. So for us, it was super important to see them in real life. And yeah, that has also changed a lot for us because we could change our payment terms with them. So instead of paying everything up front, we could now pay 30% upfront and 70% when the goods arrived at the warehouse. So that's also been a game changer for us. And we also were able to negotiate better prices for our products. So those two together have been super important for our business.
So one of the things that I really believe that, especially if you're more focused on marketing or you're a drop shipper, is when you start to scale, you have to be aware that there is a supply chain that exists. It is not just ordering from a supplier. It's not just that. It is far from that. And for a great business, it is more or less like half your business. Between like the product production and just everything along the chain, and marketing enables the selling of that product. And you have to be aware that there is a supply chain that exists, and you have to understand it at the very least. And as you really start to mature as a business, you also want to see the supply chain as individual elements, and how do you optimize along every single step. You two come from a dropshipping background. Dropshipping was easy, right? The supply chain was just sometimes a click or an app integration, right? Now you're on the other opposite end of the extreme, and in a very good way, right? Not only are you separating out fulfillment from production, even within the production piece. We were talking about some of the negotiations, but one of the elements that we were discussing in terms of how to optimize around even your production is even how they plan their materials for you, how they plan production runs for you, because no longer do you always have to plan for a container every single time. You're not planning for 3-6 month inventory at a time, and therefore tying that inventory cost in. And actually, one thing about factories is that they actually get stressed with that typical model. If you imagine, a big order comes in every 6 months and they have to scramble. They don't know exactly when it's going to come in, and you're all pushing them, hey, we want it as fast as possible, right? Whereas part of the efficiencies of you being able to just send your product to a China fulfillment warehouse in a matter of days or less, it means that your factory can actually plan for more steady production runs. They're able to start to reserve some materials in advance, and you don't need to worry about all of that. However, all of that comes together partly because you start to be aware of how the factory even works, and how do you actually work with them so that you create this win-win situation where part of the reason why they can give you rather significant price decreases is not literally just because they're just making less money, right? But you're fundamentally making their own operations more efficient. So they have the ability and they have the appetite to work with you to pass on some of their own operational savings, which, by the way, in production, most of the cost for the factory is not materials. It is everything else, labor, capacity planning. So by fundamentally completely changing up that model for your factory, they're happy. Well, they'd probably be happy to make more money still, but still, they're also happy to share some of that savings with you as well. And at the end of the day, everyone wins.
Yeah, and we when we started with dropshipping, it was the lazy way of doing business. Basically, it's like you just add some kind of fulfillment app, and you start selling products, and it seems like there's an infinite amount of product on the other side being sent, and you can just do whatever you want. But we've had those issues before that we ended up selling products that weren't in stock. And then you have the big issue that you have to start waiting on the inventory. The people start doing chargebacks. You have to start telling them that they have to wait 4 weeks or 5 weeks to get the product. And I think a lot of dropshippers are stuck in that way of thinking that that's the only way, when building a brand is exactly the opposite way of doing drop shipping. You have to talk to your suppliers. You have to go to them. You have to look into how the supply chain is. And I think a big part of that is having a great partner. And Simon has also been helping us a lot with figuring out how the supply chain works and how suppliers think and how they work. They need materials to build your product. So all the pieces need to be sourced from somewhere, some other factory. And that also takes time. And usually when we don't have enough inventory, or it takes a bit longer, it's usually due to some kind of other small piece of material that needs to be made somewhere else. So optimizing that whole system is key, I think, building a brand. And that's something Simon has guided us in, and we didn't know anything about, but that's stuff you learn along the way, and you just have to understand it and be willing to learn how that works.
Yeah, we actually learned a lot from our supplier just by asking them what are the exact lead times per piece of our product. And then we understood, like, oh yeah, that piece actually takes double the time as all other pieces. So we knew that we had to buy that well in advance, so we didn't get the same issues that we had in the past.
And part of actually great supplier or factory management is just talk to them. Like you said, it's they're people as well, right? They're not robotic businesses, and especially for a product like yours. And just talk to them, understand what makes them more efficient. And actually, that is usually something that particularly folks in D2C ecom or dropshippers, they don't do. They tell. They ask them to do something, but they don't have that conversation. And that's part of what I mean by understanding your supply chain. Now, I do want to add a quick note is that we're talking about dropshippers. I don't want to seem like anything negative about dropshipping, because I actually believe that dropshippers are some of the best marketers in the entire world, because when they don't have control of their supply chain, when they don't necessarily have the best product, not the most consistent shipping, and they can still sell profitably, that is great marketing, right? So I want to use that as a point to our audience out there. If you're dropshipping, like, it is still a valuable skill set, but see it as a first step. As a matter of fact, we've also seen many cases, and I personally seen many cases in the last decade in my own career, of folks who start with investing in a product, investing in a supply chain, but they haven't validated the market, or maybe they don't really have any kind of marketing plan, and then they launch, and so what, right? And nothing really happens. So there is a great benefit in whether it's drop shipping or that approach of how do you test your ideas as quick as possible. Some people will use crowdfunding. Some people might start with a very small production run where it's not perfect, right, to reduce their risk. And as anyone who's launching a brand out there, Thomas and Svea we're talking about scaling and where you want to be. However, when you start out, make sure that you also are paying attention to some of the points that we talked about in terms of just getting a product out, iterating later rather than getting everything perfect right now, being able to launch quickly, ship quickly, getting to your warehouse quickly, for example, to a China fulfillment center, and being able to just launch right away as opposed to waiting a couple months for it to get to a US fulfillment center. So all those things are probably necessary first steps before you start to get to some of the more mature elements of scaling a business.
You actually have to start testing quickly. You have to fail quickly. If I would have to start over again with building a brand, I would actually just look around on AliExpress, on whatever Chinese website you can find, see what people are buying, see what you like. Is there anything that catches your attention? And then just take it, build a website, take some pictures with your iPhone, take some videos with your iPhone, create some basic ads with Canva, with CapCut, and just start and test if people are willing to buy your product. Just like super simple, minimal viable products, and just see if there's a market. And once you get like 100 sales, 200 sales, then you just know that people are buying this. And you just have to improve and customize and brand the product. And then you can start building. And that's why drop shipping or testing with drop shipping is the way to go, because you don't have to spend a lot of money. I mean, with our brand, we actually started out with less than 10K. It was even less than 5K. We were completely broke, and we started with just selling the AliExpress version the first few weeks. And then, okay, this works, let's brand it. And then, okay, let's customize this and this and this. And so it went on. And I would do exactly the same if I would start over with less money.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is very, very cool stuff. You've been talking about selling into the US. You've been scaling globally, right? So that's also a very big hurdle we see for a lot of D2C brands. They're very strong in the local market. In your case, that was the origin is your US. So how do you transfer that into a global strategy? What are the hurdles? What are the things to overcome?
Yeah, so we started in the US, and that was actually the very first time that we started in the US, because the dropshipping model that we followed before that was actually in Europe. Yeah, then we thought like, if we could crack the US market, that would be the dream. We could have so many people buy our products, so that's that's where we started, and luckily it took off. So yeah, we started in the US, and I think we did that for more than a year or even two almost. That we were just selling in the US because the market is so big. But then we thought like maybe we have to test the waters in other countries. And the easiest one to test for us was Australia and the UK, just because those were English speaking countries as well. So we didn't have to change any of our ads. Our website could just be the same in English. And we tested it with a few ads in those countries. But of course, yeah, fulfillment had to follow along. Everything from being tax compliant should also follow. It's easy to expand and to test the waters, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to actually expand into other countries.
Yeah, we've experienced that firsthand. We started scaling in the UK, in Australia, in Canada, and we quickly hit the sales thresholds because you can scale to a certain amount in some countries without having to pay GST, VAT, or sales tax. And that's what we did. And once we crossed that, we decided to register for sales tax in all those countries. But actually, waiting for those numbers and getting the registration done, finding an accountant who can handle all that. It's super complicated, time consuming, and also very expensive. That was something that was a very, very big issue for us. Luckily, we found another solution, which is a merchant of record, and basically we use their tax numbers, and they take over the checkout for those markets, and they are tax compliant and have to remit all the taxes, and we can just scale in those countries very easily. I think the setup took only like 2-3 weeks. So that's also something that you have to keep in mind, that it sounds very complicated, but there are solutions to do it quickly and efficiently. Of course, there's a fee you have to pay to use these services, but it's very minimal to what you're able to unlock. And I think with Chinese fulfillment, what's so nice about it is you can ship to any country you want in basically around 10 days or less. Which you can't actually do if you have a local fulfillment center. And that's also the beauty about being able to go global very quickly and scale the brand. Because when we opened the UK, I think we did like 30 or 40K per day in revenue. And in Australia also something like that. Canada a bit less. But that easily doubles or adds another 50% in revenue than what you're already doing by basically just duplicating the brand and running the same ads, the same everything, the same customer service. So it's like a no-brainer to expand that way. And that's also I think something other brands are missing if they do local fulfillment, and should consider if they want to come back and use fulfillment near the factory.
Now, Thomas, let me add a little bit to that. Is you make it sound easy to just duplicate ads, duplicate a store, especially if it's an English-speaking country. And for your brand, I think it is probably as easy as that, but that's because the fundamentals. And Svea, you're mentioning that there was, especially a few years ago, there was that very, very popular strategy of hyper localizing to each market, even selling generic products, right? That was kind of like really the trend back in the day, and it worked. However, that was still just selling something. It was selling products to a German market, to a Dutch market. Whereas when you mention, okay, let's tackle the US. So part of it obviously is a much bigger market in terms of population, right? But it's not, I don't think it's about just specifically just because the US or English speaking or even the population is so different. It's more of like, okay, in order to actually gain traction in a massive market like that, you need to actually build a brand. You need to actually build something that people want to buy from. And I think that's exactly why when you launched in Australia and the UK, it seemed like all you had to do was just duplicate stuff because you have a brand that people actually want to buy from. So it's all credit to you two, of course, right? But it's only seemingly easy because you did all the hard work at the start to build the foundation for it. And, this is something that I want to make sure our audience realizes is it's not easy to launch to a new market, right? However, it is pretty easy when you have a global audience that probably wants to buy the brand anyways, right? Someone like Apple, I don't think they need to worry that much about how they market to the German market when they enter the German market, because everyone in the German market, they wanted to buy Apple products anyways, right? So keep that in mind. And again, credit to you two for doing the hard work first so that it seems easy to expand.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's actually, it's simple to do, but the brand has to be mature. And I think for us, when we launched in the UK and Australia, people, they look on Google and they see all the reviews and the articles and stuff, and they are like, okay, this is a real brand, we can trust it. And then it was a lot easier for us to break through in those countries. So I think if you decide to open up different countries, make sure you've at least did something substantial in the main market first. So I think that's something I missed, and it's also very important.
Yeah, because we also already had all the social proof on all our ads, so it was not like we started from zero.
Yeah, exactly. And one is one of the last things I really want to touch upon, because it's a question we're getting a lot: returns. How to handle your returns when you're scaling to multiple places and fulfilling from China. How have you guys solved this issue?
Well, we actually solved it in a creative way. So we are offering our customers who want to return their orders for whatever reason, we offer them actually a 50% refund, and they're allowed to keep the products. That way, we also minimize the impact on the environment, and that's also one of the reasons we bring up in our emails when they're asking for a return. And in like 95% of cases, customers are happy with that settlement. They just take the 50% refund and keep the products. They're super happy that they can keep them, and they don't have to go through the hassle of bringing the product back to the, like, packaging it again, bringing it back to the post office, the complete, like, that's also something that's difficult for them sometimes to do. So it's an easier option to just take the 50% refund. But I also want to add that we have kind of a hybrid model where we also have a US warehouse that's also accepting the returns. But that's also a solution that came way later. That's not something we had from the start.
Yeah, and the local fulfillment center, they accept the returns, they check the product, they look if there's any damages, and then they repackage it. And those products we store in the US fulfillment center. And we're actually able to offer express shipping on those units to just sell them again. So they are not like lost, or we don't need to ship them back to China to sell them again. So it's very, very efficient. And I think once a brand is at a certain stage, usually I think that's around the 9-figure level, you need to look into having this kind of hybrid model to be able to speak to as many people as possible. And there's a lot of people that just don't buy if it doesn't arrive in 2-3 days, and you're basically missing out on those. But it's not necessary, especially when you're not even at 10 million, not even at 20 million a year. You don't have to worry about that at all. That's not necessary.
Yeah, so let me chime in a little bit. I strongly believe in the hybrid fulfillment model for a scaling and maturing brand, probably at the size that you mentioned, Thomas, around probably at least 8-figure, 9-figure for sure. Is our biggest clients, including yourself, they do have fulfillment centers, sometimes multiple around the world, for things like returns, for things like being able to offer 2-3 day shipping if customers pay more for it. Holiday shipping, for example, is something that our clients use. And, I'm a China fulfillment guy. However, from just taking on my supply chain hat I think China fulfillment needs to be part of every brand strategy at some point. However, once a brand actually scales, it is that hybrid model that is going to be the most efficient. I think the ideal is probably, depending probably on your geographical mix, is maybe something like, 50-50 or 30-70. I mean, it really depends on what geographies you're targeting. If you're more targeting international European markets, for example, probably more China makes sense versus the other way around. And that is really the optimal, right? Now, the tricky thing about that is that takes more efforts to manage, right? It's more operationally complex because then you're dealing with stuff like also import taxes potentially. If you're actually importing, you have to manage multiple inventories. So definitely it's something that is a level up next step once you have everything stable. But yes, I certainly, and don't worry, like I'm proud to say this as well. I'm happy to say this, that China fulfillment is not the magic bullet to everything in fulfillment. It is really that hybrid model long term for really scaling and mature businesses.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all for this episode. We had much more written down to discuss, and you see how much value is there with Thomas and Svea. They're amazing individuals. If you want to get in touch with them, also let us know. Reach out to us. We will make sure that you will get the right information. Our job is actually more, and I hope you see this with this case study. Ecommerce is not just fulfilling from China. We're actually helping and trying to coach you and consult you on the journey. I'm trying to be involved and be on your side. I mean, we're doing this together. It's a win-win business. And this has just been an amazing journey for us as well. When I look at Dayu and myself and our team, we really, truly appreciate what Thomas and Svea have done for themselves, also for our company, for the community around them. So just very good job. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do share this. If you're stuck with your business, if you want to scale it, if you think about international, all the topics that we discussed, this episode covers everything. And Svea and Thomas, I really hope we can have another episode one day together again to discuss far more than just this journey that you've been going on till now, because the journey is not finished.
Exactly. Yes, certainly. We're happy to do another podcast and share more of our story and our journey. And I think a lot of people will appreciate and also find it relatable.
Thank you so much, both. Very proud, feeling fulfilled, pun intended, to partner with you two on this journey. And the credit all to you, though. You did all of the hard work, but we are very proud and continue to be very proud to be a little part of this journey and helping you where we can. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Ecommerce podcast. This episode was a special one. This is really about the journey of running a brand from dropshipping to a proper D2C brand towards a close to 9-figure brand. Please do share, like, and comment on this episode. Really appreciate it if you can help us scale. We have a message on how to leverage China fulfillment, and this case study is just amazing. Thank you for listening.